welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Integrate Yourself. We're your hosts, Allison Pillow and Maya Gottlieb. You can find me, Allison, at pureenergypdx.com, and you can find Maya at mayagottlieb.com. Today, we are with a special guest. We're with Stephanie Dalfonzo, and she is an emotional freedom technique person, and she actually contacted us, and it was really great because I just love her background. She has a background in radio as well, and she's going to tell everybody about her background and her journey, but she has a yoga background. She's pretty much done it all, and she has so much wisdom to share with you guys today. Stephanie, welcome to our show, and I would love for you to share with everybody your journey, because I was real curious about how you got from being a person that had a radio show in the radio field into the healing field, right? How did you make that transition?
It was out of absolute necessity for myself, because long before anybody was talking about the law of attraction, I was living it. I just didn't know it. When I was 14 years old, I knew I was going to be a radio DJ. Like, I knew it. And I used to hitchhike to the train station to go hang out at the radio station with the DJs. And so, I made it happen, and I ended up down in South Florida, and I was Stevie Knox, a celebrity radio DJ for 15 years, and I loved it. But like many of us women, when we get married, or at least, in the younger days when I got married, my career will follow your career. So we ended up moving outside to Portland, Oregon, and I still had one more radio show in me, and I was doing a morning show, getting up at 3:30 in the morning, and I had two young kids. My son was still in diapers, and I got horrendous insomnia. Like, it was really out of control. So I did what most people do and go to the doctor, and the doctor writes a prescription, and it helped for a little while. And then it didn't help anymore, and it spiraled out of control. And I had now spent my entire life not realizing that I was struggling with anxiety my entire life, right? This constant was in the background, and that's all I knew. So now the medication's not working. I'm freaking out because what if I take the pill and I don't sleep? And oh my gosh, how am I going to function? So again, this is 1995. I'm on a corded telephone listening to a teleclass when Stanford-trained engineer Gary Craig is talking about this new technique called emotional freedom techniques. And I was like, I was desperate. I was open to anything. So he taught this really simple tapping. I'm just showing you a couple of the points. This simple tapping sequence, and it worked. I was able to sleep again. And then I connected the dots that, the insomnia, the anxiety. So I really started to use it on everything. Gary Craig has always said, EFT, try it on everything. And so I did. But, go back to, nobody knows what EFT is at this point, right? I'm now a stay-at-home mom, and I'm telling everybody who will listen, hey, let me teach you this new technique. And they're like, oh my gosh, get away from me. But it was the beginning of a beautiful journey, because, now over 20 years later, I've learned all these different modalities, and I collected them in a book that I just published called Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom, where there's 35 natural and holistic techniques in the book that, if you use them on a consistent basis, can help you to not just manage or overcome anxiety, but truly get to the other side of it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And we've been familiar, Maya and I have been familiar with EFT since about, I think, 2006. And when we took the class at the Czech Institute, it was one of the books that was required to read before we took the course. And I thought it was super interesting, but it seems like and I can imagine how hard it would be to talk to people about it back then, because I remember even trying to talk to people then about it, and they were like, what are you talking about? So now it's just starting to I've noticed that it's coming out a little bit more in the open, and people are way more open to it than they ever used to be. Yeah. So I'm really curious, because I haven't really visited EFT in a very long time. And I wanted to kind of revisit it with you, Stephanie, and have you explain a little bit about how it works with you
Okay.
people.
So would you like me to explain how it works or guide you and the viewers, listeners through a sequence first?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Both.
So everybody, unless you're driving, everybody just close your eyes for a moment and think about a situation or event that happened recently that you can get in touch with, some stress or anger. And ladies, just nod. Yeah, I see. Okay, great. All right, so open your eyes, and I love this because it's content free. Just share what your number is, 0 to 10. 0 is not at all. As you're feeling it now, not when it happened before, but as you're feeling it now, 0 is not at all. 10 is through the roof.
Oh,
7.
I don't know. As I think about it, it's starting to slide away. I'll say 5.
Okay, so 7 and 5 is still enough to work with. And viewers / listeners, just, take note of what your number is and watch what I'm doing. I'll guide you audio through too. You're going to take the fingers of one hand and tap on the outside of the opposite hand on the fleshy part under the pinky. We call that the karate chop, and you just continuously gently tapping there, saying, even though I have this, and either say anger or stress, whatever it is, I completely accept myself and choose to let it go. And we say that 2 more times, and ladies, if you do it out loud with me,
Okay.
even though I have this
Even though I have this anger,
I completely accept myself
I completely accept
myself
and choose to let it go.
and choose to let it go.
Even though I have this anger,
even though I have
have this anger,
I completely accept myself
I completely accept
myself
and choose to let it go.
and choose to let it go.
Good. Now you take your dominant hand and just tap with those fingers on the top of your head, right in the middle, and say, this anger.
This
anger.
And you're going to go to the inside of your eyebrow. It doesn't matter which side of the face. Letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
On the outside of your eye, on the bone. Letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
In the middle, under your eye, on the cheek. Letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
Under your nose. Letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
On your chin. Letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
With your whole hand on your collarbone, ladies, don't do it too loud because of the microphones.
All right.
But if you don't have a microphone there, you can go ahead and give it a good tap. The next one's the weirdest one. People are always like, well, what? I don't know. It works. You're going to go under your arm on the side. Ladies, if you're wearing a bra, it's on your bra strap. Men, it's just figure out where a bra strap would be and tap there. Letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
Across the inside of the wrist, the opposite wrist, letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
On the outside of your hand, there's a little soft spot between your ring finger and your pinky finger. Can you feel that soft spot?
Mm-hmm.
You just rub there and say, letting go of this anger.
Letting go of this anger.
And back to the top of your head, letting go of this anger.
Letting
go of this anger.
Great. Now close your eyes and take a nice gentle breath. And then notice, Allison, yours was a 7. Where is it now?
It's a 0.
That's pretty impressive. Maya, how about you?
I forgot what we were talking about.
I know, right? That's kind of how I feel too.
Yeah. And yet sometimes it doesn't go all the way down. So there's a couple ways you can handle it. Gary Craig, I trained with him 3 times in these huge ballrooms of 500 people, and he'd always go for the 0. He'd always go for the 0. But what I've come to understand is sometimes when you're really pissed off at your boss or something, maybe you don't want to let go of all of it. But if you take it from a 7 to a 2, you can function in the workplace. So you can always leave it at like a 2 or a 3. It's much more manageable than a 5 or a 7. Or if it's something where, if it's a craving, Gary used to train with giving everybody a Hershey kiss and get a big craving for it. And, oh no, you don't taste it, just get the craving. Now put it down and we do the tapping. Well, if you're trying to overcome it, a sugar addiction, you're going to want to take that down to a 0. So you just do another round of it.
Yeah, we believe in just eating the Hershey's kiss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our approach. But yeah, no, I think that's great. And I guess I wanted to kind of also bring this more, also connect it with science. And like, I feel like this is, I remember reading about it years ago, and it seems like it's a little bit of a neuroscience approach, because Maya's doing a lot of courses with Z Health right now, and it's a similar thing. Like there's these pressure points, right, that you can use to actually retrain the nervous system to kind of reset itself, and as well as the brain. So that's what it seems like is happening with what you're doing. Yep.
And it's based on acupuncture, and acupuncture has been around for
Yeah.
5,000 years. So I think they're onto something.
I think so.
But the beauty of the tapping is that you can self-apply it. And I'm not familiar with what you're studying, Maya, but is it self-applied?
Yeah, you actually are working with the pathways of the brain, and how pain and stress and thresholds of certain things affect. So sensory input going into the motor cortex, how it goes into certain parts of the brain, what feedback is. So if a sensation or a touch, what that does to someone changes their brain information. So
wow, that's some really serious stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it gets heavy when you start talking the science of the pathways, but it's pretty amazing, because it's based on the idea that vision vestibular affects your proprioception. So if you're taking input in from any parts of your body, how its sensory input goes into your front of your brain, the front of the brain then does another pathway. So it connects to everything, and it kind of makes it understand why tapping will work for some people and tapping won't work for other people.
Right. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, there's, in my experience, there is no one size fits all.
No.
So, understanding, I love that you just said that, Maya, that, okay, there's an explanation as to why it might not work for some people. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. That doesn't mean it's good, bad, or indifferent. It just means, oh, that's not working for you. Let's go over here and try this.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. There's many tools. There's so many healing tools out there.
Yes. Yeah. And, that's why I said, I wear so many different hats. It's hard to say, okay, this is what I do, so that's why I'm an anxiety expert, because that's what I focus on. And the science, I didn't understand, because, so much of it was so heady for so long. And, that's just like didn't track for me, but they've made the neuroscience, a lot of it, they've brought it down to a level where it's like, oh, all right, I can understand that. Mm-hmm. And I can explain it. I can explain why, when one of the techniques is tossing a ball back and forth. Okay, why does this work? This works because, and you'll understand this, Maya, we're activating both sides of the brain, right? So when we're activating both sides of the brain, we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, as opposed to the sympathetic, which is the fight or flight syndrome. So when I can explain that to somebody who doesn't get the science, it's like, oh, okay. And they will actually, not everybody, but for many people, that will be like, oh, okay, that's validating. That's not woo-woo.
Right. And it's helping them combat the stress, and, so that they don't go into a high stress hormone zone. Right.
Right.
And make it harder on their hormones as well. Well, tell us how you became an anxiety expert, like in
through life.
Like, was it from personal experience?
It was.
Yeah.
It was, because I honestly didn't know until I was in my 30s that I had been having this undercurrent of stress and anxiety running in my life. I didn't know anything different. I thought it was normal to always be like that. And my husband, God bless him, we've been married for 33 years. He's had a front row seat. When we were first together, and he'd go, just chill out, that wasn't helpful,
Yeah, right. Never
made it worse, probably.
Well, yeah. But so, as I, again, taking the badge of the wise woman, I've watched technology and what it's doing to our society. And I really kind of get on a little bit of a soapbox about this, but what I'm seeing every week, I'm either seeing a new research study or a new article in, Time Magazine, New York Times, big time journals, showing that we are at crisis levels with stress and anxiety and depression, specifically with our kids and young adults. The screen time has really like had such a major effect. There was an article that research study that came out a couple of weeks ago that said they surveyed 63,000 college students. 61% of them said that they had felt overwhelming anxiety.
Yeah.
61%.
That's a lot.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But so I don't, medication was not the answer for me. So I had to find other ways. And I really have come to understand that it's like anything. If you want to run a 26.2 mile marathon, you don't just go out and run that on your first time. You have to build up the endurance, right? If you want to learn to play the piano, you have to practice and practice and practice. So too, if you want to get to the other side of anxiety, you have to practice on a daily basis. This is where, part of my yoga teacher training came in handy. In a physical asana practice, we're falling out of balance and bringing ourselves back. So when we can do that emotionally, then life is going to throw us a curveball. When it does, if we are practiced with the tennis ball that I had going back and forth, or we're practiced with this breath technique, then, we lose our balance momentarily and we can easily come back to our emotional balance.
That's true.
And that is true emotional resilience. Just days before my book was published, I was like, it was manna from heaven for me. Oprah was on 60 Minutes talking about the adverse childhood experiences research study. And it's taken a while for this to come out, but it was from back in the 1990s. 17,000 people were studied in this, and it was from the Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente, which is a big, huge healthcare company. They asked people 10 simple questions about their childhood. They were asking adults, and they were asking them 10 simple questions about adverse childhood experiences, or we shorten that to ACEs. And it was questions like, did you have an addicted parent? Was there emotional abuse? Was there physical abuse? Was there sexual abuse? Did you lose a parent to divorce or to death? And they lined up the higher you scored on this test, the direct correlation that you would have obesity or cancer or diabetes, depression, suicide attempts in adulthood. It's like, whoa. So, Oprah shortened it to, it's not enough to say, what's wrong with you, that the question has to be, what happened to you? So I personally scored really high on a test I didn't want to score really high on. My parents were divorced when I was 5. They were both alcoholics. My father committed suicide. My mother tried to commit suicide after that. So for me, this is more than just, okay, let me sell a book or whatever. It's really, I have this initiative now of, buy a book. For every book I sell, every one will be donated to help children learn these skills, because especially when children are dealing with those adverse childhood experiences and they don't know how to emotionally regulate, that's when their path just goes sideways. Yeah. So it's really like a mission of, we've got to help these kids. And if I could just tag on one more thing about the technology, I was at an event called Mindfulness in America last fall, and they brought in like the people in the mindfulness movement, John Kabat-Zinn, Sharon Salzberg, Ariana Huffington. And they also brought in the heads of tech companies. And Tony Fadell, who invented the iPod and who was co-inventor of the first 3 iPhones, was talking about how these puppies are intentionally made to be addictive.
I've heard
that. All of those, but this is the guy who invented it.
I know, right?
Publicly. I'm
crazy.
Sitting in this hall listening to him, and he says, all those notifications, every time you get one, you're getting a dopamine hit.
I believe it. Yeah.
What happens when you get a dopamine hit? You want another one. He said, I wonder if my grandchildren are going to say, my grandfather was the guy who ruined society.
Oh, wow.
And I sat in the back of the auditorium, and I'm like thinking about my phone. My phone only makes one sound. It's a gentle little Zen chime that goes ding if somebody's actually trying to call me.
Old fashioned, right?
Yes, I'm very old fashioned. I'm proud of it.
Nothing wrong with that. I think that there's Yeah, we have to. There's a whole new level of restriction when it comes to your phones. I think of discipline, or however you want to say it. That because it does become very addictive to want to get on the apps all the time, or check your email, or check whatever, um, and it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem for me. I know that, and it's I don't
Yeah,
notice
I'm
it
not going to
until
say
I'm like
I'm
on a
not going to say I've got
vacation.
it mastered. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say I've got it mastered. But I've seen, because my kids are older, I've seen when my daughter was 4, I saw a little boy down the street with one of the very first handheld video games, and he's off in the corner playing by himself, and all the other kids are over there. And I was like, that's not right. There's something wrong here. And so, again, I feel like I'm on a soapbox about it, but, kids have just gotten so, like, they're so into their phones, they're not connecting, like, face to face, even like this. I think it's great through technology that we can all be together doing this, but when
Right.
the kids don't know how to connect with people on a real in-person time thing, I think we have a problem.
Absolutely. The one thing I like to tell people, though, is there is an off button.
Yeah.
And
That's
you
what I would. Yeah,
can
exactly.
do exactly what TV was when it came out. Like, you can turn it off. And like, people who do detoxes from Facebook and all that, I mean, I do think some people take it as a bigger announcement, so that people will be like, oh, look, I'm going to be missed. But I think really the ones that really do take themselves off to a period of time, because it's kind of hard if you're trying to promote yourself, your business, you're trying to get out there, especially our podcast. We really have enjoyed just spreading word of who we meet and what people have to say to help other people. And, you kind of think about how often, you need to utilize it. And
Right.
when you utilize it, they know that. You know that you have a business that you're trying to promote. So it's not going to go anywhere, but we do have still the option of turning it off when we
Mm-hmm.
don't need it. So
Finding that balance, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
all about balance in all areas of our lives.
Yes.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
not to be afraid of our phones, but to definitely know that we don't have to have the biggest bling ever. It's
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
or the most followers, or the most liked.
yeah,
Well,
It's
and
really,
again,
yeah.
to my point about the kids and the young adults, there's so much cyberbullying that's going on through this, and that their self-worth is so wrapped up in how many people liked their picture and how many
Right.
times did they take that selfie to get the perfect one to post it. That's a lot of pressure.
yeah, a lot of
It
thought.
Yeah.
Oh, that wasn't good enough. Oh, I gotta do it again.
And I see
Right.
adults doing that too. I think that kids do learn from their parents as well. And my kids, honestly, I think my 16-year-old is just on Instagram every once in a blue moon, and my other one has no interest whatsoever on any of those, Facebook
Well,
or Instagram.
they have a good
But
model, don't they?
but I'll say that they do love YouTube.
Hmm.
So I so I have a feeling that some of those things might kind of like, I think the next generation might not use it as much, but then again, something else might replace it. So I think that the parents are, we have to kind of guide them in a certain direction and help them regulate that as well. It's really important, and not say that it's bad or you can never use it or get on it, but because technology is a part of their generation and it's going to continue to be, and there's nothing we can do
Yeah.
about it. So
Yeah.
they're going to have to learn how to live with it. And it's different than our generation because we didn't actually have that. I mean, I think back and I think if I actually had that kind of a distraction, I'd be on it all the time as a kid. I wouldn't have ever probably gone outside. But luckily I was able to not have that. I think I remember when Atari came out, and it was okay. It was kind of boring. It got boring after a while, but it was exciting at first. But TV was really exciting to me, and it was a way for me to really detach when I was a little overwhelmed, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
that might be to some extent what kids are, like you said earlier, maybe there's too much for them to handle. They can't handle everything, so they have to detach somehow, and maybe technology is a way that they can do it. And there might not be anything wrong with that, doing it temporary, on occasion, because for survival purposes, because some kids deal with a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah, I'm certainly not saying, no phones, no
Oh
technology.
yeah, no, I
But,
understand. No,
the pendulum,
I wanted to be devil's advocate a little
right.
bit, you
The
know. So,
pendulum swings both
yeah,
ways.
yeah.
And, Allison, your kids, they have you as a model, and you don't strike me as, who's always on
We're
your
in the
phone.
Pacific Northwest, and we're just really close to nature, and that's one of the reasons we moved out here, so they could be closer to nature, and they love being outside. So, and of course, basketball is now the thing they're into. But my oldest likes to camp, and he likes to hike, and do a lot of things outside. He's a total outdoor kid. And my youngest, he's more into basketball, but they've actually bonded over basketball. So it's like really, stuff that isn't anything, it's nothing new, right? I mean, but that's what they're into. And
Yeah, but
so, yeah,
those are both very healthy
yeah,
ways of, engaging or being in the world, right?
yeah,
Because when they're out in nature, they're probably not checking their phones. And when they're at the
no.
basketball game, they're probably paying attention to the basketball game. They're in the present moment.
Yes, yes, and which is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wanted to hear a little bit about, the passion that you had for radio and
Me too. I
why,
want to hear
and
about that.
where did you become so, like, when did it happen? Like, what was it that you were doing that made you, kind of feel that was the road you needed to go? And then tell us a little bit more after that. What did you experience as being a radio DJ?
So it was somewhat like what you mentioned, Allison, about, TV, you could detach. So as I said, I did not have the, lovely childhood, and radio would take me away. That was like the way to just take me away from what I really wasn't, having a good time experiencing. And so then I started calling the DJs and talking to them, and, wow, that was a whole nother level. And then I would, this was
So
long
excuse me, quick. So did you call in? Like, I remember when we would listen to radio, and then you'd have like the top 10 or whatever 100, and then they asked you to call in for like a quick, if you wanted to win tickets to something or just get it on the phone. Is that what you mean when you called them, or
Yeah,
what were you?
I somehow called them, and they would be talking to me, not on the air. We'd be talking while the record was playing. And
Oh, yeah.
so, then I took it the next step, and I would hitchhike, because we lived out in the country. I'd hitchhike, which, I would never do now. But I would hitchhike to the train station, and take the train down to the radio station and hang out with the DJs. And there was Maureen Flaherty on WYSP Philadelphia, and she was my idol. She was like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. And I had a clip from the Philadelphia Inquirer of her with her long hair, and she was thin, and she was queuing up a record. The vinyl is coming back into vogue now.
I know, right?
Yeah,
So I started, I had an internship for my senior year of high school, just an internship at the radio station. And then I started working at the radio station as a secretary. Now, I had no secretarial skills, but I somehow managed to land this job. And I went down to South Florida for the first time in my life. My boyfriend had moved down there, and I fell in love with it. It was like, this is paradise. So I was so naive. I go back to my boss in Philadelphia and say, because he'd said, you can't start on the radio in Philadelphia. And I came back and I said, well, can I start on the radio in Philadelphia? He goes, yeah, sure. So I packed up everything I owned. The biggest thing I had was this album collection. And I had it in a little U-Haul thing on top of my car, drove down to Fort Lauderdale, and I managed to land a job. And I was, you do the midnight to 6 Sunday night into Monday morning shift. That's where you start.
Yeah.
I'm driving into work one night, and I'm listening to the guy who's on before me, and I was going by Stephanie. I was trying to be so mysterious. And he comes out of a Fleetwood Mac song and says, that's Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks, and Stevie Knox is coming up at midnight. Knox was my maiden name, so it stuck.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So I went on to have a very successful career. I was pretty hot stuff, and it was so fun. And I realize now how blessed I am. I was able to use my voice to hypnotize people into coming back to listen
Yeah,
day after
yeah.
day after day. And then I go on to be a certified hypnotist, and I use my voice to help guide you over here. Like, how blessed is that, that I'm given this incredible gift that I've now been able to use in so many different areas.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I love how you put that, like and it's true. Your voice is, everyone has, there are certain people that have a very hypnotic voice that keep people coming back. And that's what I feel like radio used to be, like it was,
The storytellers, the old storytellers.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not like that anymore.
No, not at all. Now, I mean, there's a
But-
lot, podcasting, of course, is huge now, and that's
Yeah.
kind of taken the place of that, but there's still a lot of noise in some ways, right? It's the art of it's a little bit lost, I feel like. And I think it's so cool to go back to, I don't know, that for whatever reason, that when I thought about having my podcast, I always thought about the people in radio, and I was like, that I just thought it was so cool to be able to be a DJ,
It was fun beyond belief, like so fun. I absolutely loved what I was doing, and I was able to do a lot of good too. I just found, let me see if I can find this real quick. I found this picture in my drawer the other day. This is me probably in the early 80s.
Oh, wow.
The March of Dimes ambassador at the March of Dimes walk. And so I was able to really do great things as far as, charity work. And when the hurricane came through, Hurricane Andrew, that was kind of the beginning of the end of my radio career, because I was still a hellion. I didn't start to tone things down until after the event. The hurricane came through and it trashed Miami area, like down in that area. But up in Fort Lauderdale, where the radio station was and where we lived, we all had all these supplies that now these people in Miami desperately need. So I said, well, why don't we do a drive? Why don't we have people come to the radio station and bring us the supplies? So we had a caravan of 100 vehicles full of supplies to go down there. And we got to the checkpoint and the National Guard wouldn't let us through.
Oh my God. Why?
Because, well, it had to go over to the depot and get sorted out, and then they would, so they let us in. I was in the lead radio station vehicle, and what I saw was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And mothers were coming out begging for, milk for their babies. And
oh God.
it was heartbreaking. And again, I was quite a bit younger then. And my boss was my program director, who was younger than I was at the time, says, oh, well, we were simulcasting the local TV station. He goes, this would be great for you to call in and do a report. The timing of it probably wasn't the best, because the head of the National Guard was in the studio when I called in, and I had no filter. So I laid into him. And they cut me off. And then conveniently enough, not too long after that, I didn't have a job anymore. But you know what? I don't regret it. I certainly would handle it in a much different way now. I just was like, I was horrified at what I saw, and you are preventing us from getting these people the supplies that they need. So I don't regret that, because I'd like to think that maybe I got them the help a little bit faster.
Yeah. I mean, it was worth what you had an emotion that was, coming out of you at the time, because it was obviously an insane thought to say, you have all this stuff and you won't let us come across with it because it's not not regulated, right? It's not checked out. It's not made sure.
Right. It wasn't through their protocol. And, again, I would not do it. I would just do it in a smarter way.
When you're in your 20s and you're
passionate,
right?
You're passionate about that cause, and you cared a lot, it sounds like. And it was. I remember that vaguely. I was in college and I had a teammate in college who lost her home completely during that time. She was from Miami.
It was, I saw dead cows on the side of the road.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it was you can't ever wrap your head around that. And
Yeah.
that's why, you know, again, I was so much younger and, you know, I just, but, you know, to the point of being an anxiety expert, hello, if I'd known some of these ways of dealing with it, I probably wouldn't have gone to the extreme that I did with him.
Right. Right.
So, you know, live and learn. It gives you an opportunity now to, you know, say, oh, you know what? I've been there. I'm not, you know, sitting on a throne saying, oh, I'm the anxiety expert because I've studied all this. I'm like, okay, no, I've lived it. I've got the t-shirt and I can prove it.
And now it's in a book form,
Yeah.
which I really find that's an amazing story, because you think parents don't have all the answers. And when you get to that point where you just can't explain something, or you're just too, you know, you don't have the experience to say, okay, here's 30, what'd you say, 35 different techniques? Here's 35 techniques. Find one that works for you, because the ones I gave you didn't work. So we're going to keep looking, instead of, you know, where parents may find that they're lost, or kids don't want to go to their parents. You now have a book. It's like being a mobile mentor, right? Because, you know, sometimes you don't really have access to everything. And if you get it contained and you have anxiety, here, try this. And that's a good way of doing it.
Having all those different techniques, it's like, I want to just present you with the smorgasbord, and then you find what works for you. It doesn't mean you have to learn all 35.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, you know, kids need that. Like I said earlier, you know, you need something different than just detaching with technology, you know. I think it's great when they have resources like yours, Stephanie, and they could do something through movement, or, you know, or even like learn meditation at a young age, you know, is really a powerful thing too.
Yeah, and I have a friend over here, she's on the other side of the border with New York. She is a teacher in an elementary school. She's also a yoga teacher and a mindfulness teacher, and so she's brought that into the school, not
so
into
great.
just her class, but into her school. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
I see pictures of her with her kids, you know, laying on the yoga mats, or, you know, sitting at the desks meditating. I mean, it's really fantastic to see that.
It is. There's an example, Maya, of a school in Atlanta. I remember right before I moved, there was some yoga programs that were going into some of these schools that didn't have a lot of money, and they had a lot of issues, and it was really fascinating. They had the kids do yoga every morning. And then the principal would put up like positive affirmations all over the school, and the kids like really, really resonated with. They started really responding well to it, and it got a whole lot better. I mean, they saw like great results from it, and it just seems like such a simple thing, right? It's not that hard.
It's KISS. Keep it simple, sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say it that way because that's not what you're expecting me to say.
No.
Right? But keep it simple.
I like that. Yeah.
Sweetheart. It's like such a much nicer, you know, more like a hug energy instead of that kind of energy.
It's more kindness to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're not stupid. You're just, you don't know. And it's not to say you can't know, because that's what basically I remember what stupid was. Stupid was you were ignorant to the fact that you didn't care, but the fact that you do care makes you a sweetheart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. I love the way you just put that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So what else on the aspect of radio do you see that you learned the most from?
That's a really great question. Again, commercial radio, you know, I'm not talking about podcasts, but I'm talking about commercial radio. It's kind of soulless, in my opinion now. You know, there used to be an art and a craft to it. And, you know, each DJ could bring their own flair to it. And, you know, you could bring your community together. And so there's really not that much of it anymore, because it's, you know, one DJ whose show is on, you know, hundreds of radio stations across the country. And it's not that they're not good shows, but we've lost that connection of that community aspect. And, you know, I really loved that, you know, I don't know why I found that picture. Like, that picture is so old, and I just found it the other day. And I was like, you know, that was such a wonderful ability ability for me to not just, be a star, but to actually affect good in the world, right? Because I think, and I think you two as well, our missions are to affect good in this world, to bring goodness to people's lives and to be that light. I like to think of being like a lighthouse, with the lights burning bright to guide people around the shoals. And in some way, I was able to do that through the radio too, because I was entertaining you. I was, if I didn't entertain you, you weren't coming back. If you weren't coming back, I didn't have good ratings and I was not going to have a job.
Right.
So it was really, it's about the connection. And I think taking it back to the discussions about social media earlier is, I believe, and I am old school, connections are at the heart of goodness in this world. That the more disconnected we get, the higher the stress and anxiety levels are. So that whether it's, through lovely podcasts where it's like, okay, let's get real and let's connect. That's bringing that back. And, that is that integrating, because when it's what would the opposite be from integrate?
Well, disconnected.
Disconnected, right? So
disheveled. Yeah.
Well, when we are separate like that, there's conflict. And when we can integrate, even if we're on opposite sides of an issue, if we can sit and listen, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
That's all.
Yeah.
Right? And how many times are people like, they're not listening to you? They're like, how am I going to respond? How am I going to respond?
Yeah, that happens a lot. I used to do that a lot. Yeah.
And when you start getting conscious about it, it's like,
This has helped me not do that as much now that I've started podcasting. Really.
And we were kind of I think we got told when we were interviewed by two, as two, instead of just one person being interviewed, that it was a little bit more challenging, and that they've had issues with other couples, or partners on a radio or on a podcast, because there'd be a lot of arguing or something like that. But I had to laugh, because it was like, it just taught us really quickly how important just sitting and just listening to others is so important. And like, we don't need to fight for the time on the air. It's already there. It's already open.
Yeah.
You know when to talk. You know when to say something. But it's just that funny part of it all, where you kind of get, you're just watching it go. Like, oh, look at that. There he goes.
Yeah, the time is right when it flows. It just happens, and you don't have to think about it too much. But at first we were like, how are we going to do this? Like, how do we know, when to talk? And especially when we have a guest on, and it just happens intuitively, which has been really cool. And I think also, Maya and I have this energy together that's really, that's very integrative.
Yeah.
We know how to integrate our each other into the conversation with a guest. And that's been really cool to learn and to experience. So, and that's the thing about, voice is such an art, speaking is such an art. And with it, when you mentioned the thing about the DJing in the beginning, like before, I remember like listening to DJs, and like, actually there's this, who is it? Sir Mix-a-Lot is bringing it back, because like he's got this show in Portland now, like comes out at like lunchtime. I don't know what day, but I try to listen to it, because it reminds me of the old way of DJing, and he just has this flow to his voice, and it just makes you want to keep listening. It's like listening to a song, as he talks, and I'm just like, this is so great, and everything he says rhymes too, of course. And so it's like, that reminds me of the old like DJs that we used. That's why you just wanted to hear them, because it was fun, and it just made you feel really positive, and it was upbeat. And again, like you said about community, it brings the community together, because that's your city. That's the person who's kind of representing it. So it's I think it's definitely a lost art. And it's something that I'm very interested in and learning more about as well, just as podcasting develops, and to see how, all these podcasts come out. And I tend to not like the overly produced podcasts so much. I'm finding out, more.
Well, and I wanted to say that the two of you, you're so warm and inviting that you are like inviting the listener in, like, oh, come listen to a conversation. And that is that art that you keep mentioning. So
Oh, yeah.
you've got it down, girls.
Thank you. That's so great to hear.
Well,
Appreciate
my
that.
main thing was I just like having conversations with people and finding like the remarkable stories that come with the person,
Yeah.
like that opening of just saying, let's just go from the cuff and just have a conversation like we're having coffee together, and you and I are just kind of letting out, some information that needs to be passed on, and it's just kind of that's always been the intention, is just to say, come on, tell me something about yourself.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you something about mine.
And we record it and send it out to millions of people.
And if I can, if there are men listening, please, I'm not bashing you. It's not meant this way at all. But the overly produced, what I flash on that's masculine energy. And this is feminine energy. And again, not to bash guys, it's just apples and oranges.
Mm-hmm.
No, I understand where you're coming from on that, because it's not so much bashing. It's just interests. It's like female interests are different, or women's interests, generally speaking, are going to be different than the male interest, or men's interest, I should say. And that's what I discovered. And that's the whole reason, I've said this before in this podcast, why we decided to approach wellness from a female perspective, because it wasn't being put out there. And and now I'm finding, like you said, Stephanie, that even with podcasting, like women just want to hear things a different way, I think. And for me, I know that for myself, like I prefer to be like sitting in on a conversation, or because it's a community thing, I think, in a way, and you feel connected that way, as opposed to something that, is like overly produced. But yeah, I think that there is a lot of truth to that, though. I really agree. And without sounding stereotypical, or male bashing, which I think there's nothing wrong with men, and there's so many great men in the world. But I think that, we definitely, there's no doubt that we have different interests in general, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about, Stephanie? Like, is there anything that you specifically, besides your book, you wanted to promote, or?
If somebody wants to just get 5 of the techniques out of the book, they can get it at 5easywaystocalmanxiety.com. The number 5, easywaystocalmanxiety.com. Because I really am, I think you can tell, I have a serious passion about all of this. So I have my book, I work with clients privately, and I have tons and tons and tons of free resources, because I don't want to be, I have gone down the rabbit hole with so many of, the big coachy coach programs, and, you spend just ridiculous amounts of money and stuff. I've got a clear picture of that's not who I am, and that my mission is to get these tools, these skills and techniques out there, so that if the book is only $15, but if that's a stretch for you, then okay, go get 5 of them, because you can start with 5 and just do a combination of those 5 or all 5. And if you do it with repetition, again, I make this so clear, in just about every time I'm talking or in the book, on my website, you have to do them. Like I talk about self-help, shelf-help, because how many books have I bought? How many programs? How many CDs? Now they're MP3s. And they would be sitting on the shelf that was sagging because there were so many of them on there.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, as we journey down this self-improvement path, we're looking for the answers. And sometimes this is why my book and my whole approach is so simple, is because simple is what works. When we overcomplicate it, when I was first taught meditation, the teacher said, you have to meditate 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. And I was like, no way, right? And empty your mind. Okay, tell me to empty my mind. 300,000 thoughts just came raging in, right? Like, okay. Oh, meditation for me is, it's like a little child starts running off. Oh, come back here. And you bring your awareness back. They run off again, you bring it back. Sharon Salzberg, I heard this from my yoga teacher mentor, because I was like, am I ever going to get it right on meditation? And she said, her mentor is Sharon Salzberg. And she said, it's just about finding that 8 seconds of bliss. And I was like, whoa, that's a relief, because I kept thinking I was doing it wrong.
Right.
Oh, okay. You know what? I can find those few seconds of bliss, and then my mind's going to run off and I bring it back. Well, when I do that over and over again, those moments of bliss might get a little longer. They might not, but I'll still experience them.
Yeah. I love that.
Well, it was a relief because, again, I'm so big on one size doesn't fit all. All 3 of us are different sizes. So to say, okay, do this and it's going to be the thing for you, it isn't it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's find what works for you and start doing that. Do more of that. Do more of that. Less of this, and your life will change. And you really can overcome anxiety. I think that if somebody's listening or viewing and they think, I would just invite you to start where you are. Get my 5 techniques and start playing with them. Just take one technique. I was on a TV show this morning and I had to get up very early, and I was like a kid the night before the first day of school. So I woke up at 3 a.m.
No.
I was like, okay, I need to go back to sleep. And I did one of my favorite breath techniques, which is to simply, as you breathe in, think, I'm breathing in. As you breathe out, think, I'm breathing out.
Mm-hmm.
In, I'm breathing out. And I went back to sleep. Like, how simple is that? Right? So if you are struggling and you think, I can't do all of this, just try that one thing. Just try that one. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. Practice it for the next 7 days and then check in and you'll notice things are different.
Nice.
Thanks. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Stephanie, how can people reach you, and what's your where are you in terms of like Instagram, Facebook? Yeah, going back to the horrendous thing that we did.
No, the digital technology that we're finding peace and balance and integrating with all these other practices, right? That's how we're doing it.
Yes.
They can find me at stephaniedalfonzo.com. I know that's a mouthful, so hopefully you'll put a link in the show notes.
Yes, we will.
Facebook, Stephanie Dalfonzo, Instagram, Stephanie Dalfonzo, Twitter, S Dalfonzo. But if you just find me on my website, all the things are there. And I've just recently started playing with Instagram because I also am an amateur photographer. And that lovely picture that you have behind you of the coast, I have tons of nature photography.
I'll definitely follow you. I love that kind of thing.
I'm really loving Instagram for that, for being able to share my photography and like my social media posts, like for my business, because we had talked before we started recording about how we have to be online because this is how we promote our businesses. So instead of buying stock photos, I use my own pictures.
I do that too, actually. Yeah, I think that doesn't happen very often.
No.
Yeah.
People are buying stock photos, but like this one behind me, that is from a Dale Chihuly glass exhibit that was at the New York Botanical Garden last year. It was this beautiful big orb. There's like thousands of pieces of glass in that, and that's just a zoom in of it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So I miss the nature part of living in the Northwest. I mean, we have beautiful nature. It's just only for 6 months of the year here. But when it's nature time, I'm out in it and really enjoying it with the photography. So I'm really loving Instagram for that.
Cool.
Nice.
I love it. Well, thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for coming on our show, being such a wonderful guest and such a great resource of wisdom for our listeners. We'll definitely put all your information on the show notes as well as under the video that we're going to be doing here. So thanks again for coming on. And
I really appreciate this.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to get to know you and meet you and all that. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for the good you're doing with this podcast. From my heart, thank you. I really do appreciate
Thank you. We appreciate that so much. Yeah.
Thank you.